Welcome to Python Basics, Functions and Loops. I'm Philip with RealPython, and today we'll talk about, well, you guessed it, functions and loops. Functions are the building blocks of almost every Python program. They are where the real action takes place. Functions break code into smaller chunks. They are great for defining actions that a program will execute several times. So instead of writing the same code each time the program needs to perform the task, just call a function. You can think of a function like it being mixed dough. The dough for pancakes may contain a bunch of ingredients like flour, eggs, butter, and milk. But later, when you bake the pancakes, you just work with the dough instead of the individual ingredients. But sometimes you need to repeat some code several times in a row. This is where loops come in. A loop comes in handy when you want to perform a task over and over again. You can think of loops like it being a donut. I don't know about you, but I can't just eat one donut. To be really satisfied, I need to eat multiple donuts in a row. In this course, we'll have a closer look at both functions and loops. And we'll also talk a little bit about pancakes and donuts. Let me show you the structure of this course. First, we will have a look at functions that you may already know. You will learn how to call a function and what happens when Python executes a function. With the knowledge of the first lesson, you will be ready to create your own function, and we will have a look at the anatomy of a function and explore some details. In the third lesson, I will show you how you can document your newly created function. After this deep dive into functions, we will hop over to the next big part of the course, loops. You will learn about while loops and for loops, how to write them, and what's the difference between them. You will cover quite some ground during this course, so I'll give you a bunch of resources at the end to continue your journey as a Python developer. Sounds good? Okay, then let's get started. You may have seen functions like print, len, and round already. These are called built-in functions because they are built into Python, and you can use them in your Python programs right away without adding any additional code. So they are perfect to investigate what functions actually are. Let's hop over to idle. First, I'll show you how to use type, which is also a built-in function, to inspect a string and an integer. Then we'll have a closer look at the print, len, and round functions. You can check the type of a value by typing type and then the variable or the value of a variable in parentheses. So here I type type3 and type hello. So you can see that the integer 3 has the type integer and the string hello has the type str. Just like integer values and string values, function values also have a type. So if I type print, it tells me that print is a built-in function or method. You can get a similar output in idle when you just type the name of a function. So if I type len or round or print, Python tells me that len, round, and print are built-in functions. But if you actually want to execute a function, you must call the function. In Python, you use two parentheses to call a function, just like you saw with type at the top of this terminal. So if I type print followed by an opening parenthesis and a closing parenthesis, then something happens. It's not outputting built-in function print anymore, but an empty line. Okay, we will come back to this in a bit. Let's first try out the same with the len function. len, opening parentheses and closing parentheses, and if I run this, I get an error. The error message that Python shows me says type error, len takes exactly one argument, but 0 given. An argument is a value that gets passed to the function as input. Some functions can be called with no arguments, so like we saw with the print function. and some can take as many arguments as you like. len requires exactly one argument. So let's make len happy. And let's make me happy by using the word pancake. So when I type len, opening parentheses, and then put in the string pancake, then I actually get the value 7 back. That's cool. That works. So what happened there? We called the len function with the string pancake as an argument. Then Python executes the function and calculates the length of the string. The length of pancake is the number 7. Finally, len returns the number 7. The process for executing a function can be summarized in 3 steps. First, the function is called, and any arguments are passed to the function as input. The second step is the function executes, and some action is performed with the arguments. Third, the function returns, and the original function call is replaced with the return value. The last step is interesting. A function returns a value. That means you can assign this value to a variable. Let's try this out. Okay, now I create the variable numLetters and say len pancake. If I run it, then nothing happens. But if I type numLetters, you see that numLetters now contains the number 7. So again, first len is called with the argument pancake. The length of the string pancake is calculated, which is the number 7, and then len returns the number 7 and replaces the function call with the value. You can imagine that after the function executes, the line of code looks like this. Num letters equals 7. So Python assigns the value 7 to numLetters and waits for your next input. And while Python waits for our next input, let's dive in a bit deeper into the topic. You've learned how to call functions, and you learned that they return a value when they're done executing. Because I like emoji just as much as I like pancakes, I created this little illustration. The waving hand stands for the function call. Then the cogwheel represents that the function is doing something. Finally, the function returns something for you. For this, I used an envelope, because envelopes usually contain something of value. See what I did there? Sometimes, though, functions do more than just return a value. When a function changes or affects something external to itself, it is said to have a side effect. Let's investigate what that means. A famous function that has a side effect is the print function. When you call print with a string as an argument, the string is displayed in the Python shell as text. This looks like a return value, but it's actually a side effect. When you call print, the text that gets displayed is not a return value. The print function itself doesn't return the hello string. But what does print return then? Well, we already learned that we can assign the return of a function to a variable. So let's try and say return value equals print hello. When we run it, then hello gets displayed in the Python shell again, but now we can check what return value is. And nothing is shown. Print returns nothing? Didn't we learn that all functions return something? Well, you're right. Actually, print returns a special value called none. None indicates the absence of data. Let's check the type of return value. Aha, it's none type. So it's true. All functions in Python return a value, even if that value is none. I know what you're thinking. Wouldn't it be cool to have a print function that also returns the text value? Say no more. In the next lesson, you will learn how to create your own function that can actually return something. In the previous lesson, you learned how to execute functions. Now it's time to create your own function. You'll start by creating a print function that also returns its input value. Before we hop over to our code editor again, let's think of a name for our function. Just like with variable names, function names must follow some rules. The rules for naming a function are the following. A function name can contain letters, numbers, or underscores. A function name, however, must not start with a number. Let's keep these rules in mind and start programming. When you define a function, you start with the so-called function signature. The function signature always starts with the def keyword, which is short for define. After the def keyword comes the function name. With Python's rules about naming functions in mind, let's call it shout underscore and underscore return. Oops, and there should be an underscore, of course. Then you add a pair of parentheses. When your function accepts arguments, you provide a list of parameters. Our shout and return function should only accept one argument, which we name input string. A parameter is sort of like a variable, except that it has no value. It's a placeholder for actual values that will be provided whenever the function is called with one or more arguments. At the end of your function signature, you must put a colon. When you hit enter, you're inside the function body. You can see that idle shows 3 dots at the beginning of the line, and my cursor is indented. This is vitally important. Every line that is indented below the function signature is understood to be part of the function's body. We'll play around with the indentation a bit later. For now, let's continue with the function body. Define a variable called loud underscore input, which is equal to input underscore string. That's the parameter that we are passing in. Dot upper. The upper method converts every character in the input string to uppercase. Press enter. You can see on the 3 dots that you are still in the function body. And now you call the print function with loud input as argument. If we would stop now, then our function would return none, exactly the same as the print function. To return loud input, we must close the function body with a return statement. So press enter again, and then use the return keyword, and after it, loud input. So the shout and return function returns loud input in the end. When you define a function in idle's interactive window, you need to press enter twice after the line containing return for Python to register the function. So if I hit return, as you can see, idle is smart enough to jump out of the function body after the return statement, but there are still 3 dots on the beginning of the line. So I have to press enter another time to actually jump out of the function body. You can see with the 3 carets at the beginning that we are now outside of the function body and Python is waiting for our input. Awesome, let's try out our new function. You call a user-defined function just like any other function. Type the function name followed by a list of arguments enclosed by parentheses. So for our function, it's shout underscore and underscore return. And with an opening parentheses, you can see that idle already recommends that we put an input string as an argument. So let's put hello in lowercase in it as a string, close the parentheses, and press enter. Now idle shows hello in uppercase 2 times. One time it's the side effect of the print function we're calling inside of shout and return. And the second time is the returned value that idle shows. Let's try to assign the return value to a variable. Let's call the variable my underscore return and set it equal to shout and return. And this time let's use hi as an lowercase string, close the parentheses at the end, and press enter. Okay, that looks good. So now hi is printed one time. Again, that's a side effect of the print function. And if we're typing my return enter, then you see that my return now contains the value hi in uppercase letters. That's pretty cool, but there is a caveat. Unlike built-in functions, user-defined functions are not available until they've been defined with the def keyword. So if you wouldn't have defined the function at the top of this window, it wouldn't be there. So you must define the function before you can call it. To explore a bit further what I mean by this, let's move to the editor window. Okay, on the right side, you now see the idle editor window. I have created a file called functionsandloops.py and I saved it on the desktop. Now let's see what happens when we just call the shout and return function in the idle editor window without doing anything else. So I type shout and return and type hello and close it off. I save the file and now I go to the menu and say run module. Later I will shortcut this with F5. And when I run the file, I get a name error. Name shout and return is not defined. Although you defined the shout and return function in the idle prompt window before, it's not available in your Python files by default. So again, that's the difference to Python's built-in functions that are available for you. So to actually be able to use the function, let's copy the code from the left window to the right window. All right, I now copied the code to the editor window. I save the file and now I press F5 to run it and still an error. As you can see in the window on the left side, the error is exactly the same like the error before, although we now have our shout and return function in our functions and loops file. The issue is this. We call the function shout and return in line 1, but we define the function only in line 3. So Python doesn't know about the function yet when it executes the shout and return function in line 1. Or to be more precise, when Python tries to execute shout and return in line 1. Let's switch them. I cut the function call from line 1, put the function definition there, and then I paste the shout and return call into line 6. I save the file and run it. And now you see that on the left side, it prints hello in uppercase letter. It works. As you can see, order is important. This also holds true for the function body. And you need to pay special attention to the return statement at the end of the function body. Once Python executes a return statement, the function stops running and returns the value. If any code appears below the return statement and is indented like it's part of the function body, then it will never run. For example, if you put the print function after the return statement and save and run the file again, then Python doesn't complain, it restarts the file, but the print statement is never executed. But it's still valid Python, so there is no error. So you really have to remember that the order is important and that you put your return statement at the end of your function body. Oh, and speaking about order, when we first defined the shout and return function in the interactive window, I mentioned that the indentation is important. Indentation is the space before your text. By default, that's 4 spaces in idle and should also be 4 spaces in your editor of choice if you're using another editor. Python is not strict with it, so you could also put all the code of your function body in with 2 spaces. Let me quickly fix that part here as well. So our function should work now again. I put the print function on line 3 again and the return statement on line 4 again. So the order is correct, but now I have 2 spaces in front of the function body. I save the file and now I run the file. And as you can see on the left window, hello is printed in uppercase letters. So it works, although we only have 2 spaces at the beginning of the function body. Generally, you should stay with 4 spaces. That's a convention that's defined in PEP 8. That's the style guide for Python. It says that it's recommended to indent your code with 4 spaces. While this is not a strict rule, there is one rule that you must follow when indenting code in a function's body. Every line must be indented by the same number of spaces. For example, if I only put 2 spaces here and I save the file and I try running it, then idle already shows a window. Unindent does not match any outer indentation level. So you can't even run this file with idle. You also see that here there is a red line marking the error. So let's put this in order again. What happens if we indent line 2 more? Let's put 3 spaces in there now. I save the file, I try to run it, and again, the same error. Unindent does not match any outer indentation level. Okay, here line 3 is marked again, although our error is in line 2. The reason for this is that Python only recognizes in line 3 that something went wrong. Let's put it back in order. Let's save it and run it. And now it works again because the indentation level is consistent. There is also a case where idle probably won't complain. And this is when we take the print statement out of the function and put it in line 4. Although this time we don't indent it. I put a line in between so we can see it better. So now on line 5, it says print loud input, but it's indented without any spaces. So it's basically not indented in comparison to the situation before where it was indented just like the function body with 4 spaces. Let's see what happens now. I save the file and run it. And now we get a name error. Name loud input is not defined. That's because loud input right here is actually really not known to Python because that's the variable that we are having inside of the function, but outside it's not known. So you have to be careful where you put your statements and references to variables inside of a function body. Again, you have to indent it correctly and also take good care about where in the order of the function body you put your function calls or statements. Again, return should always be at the end of your function. Okay, let's clean the code up a little bit so we don't have so many blank lines sitting around here. I save the file just to be sure. Let me run it. It works. It prints hello in uppercase letters on the left side. That's fine. And we're almost finished with our own function. I may not point out the indentation level every time in the next lessons, so be careful at which position your cursor is when you're programming and when you're following along. All right, and that's it for now. But your very own function is missing one last detail. You wonder what it is? Well, you will find out in the next lesson.